Commander Kira Jensen had attended enough diplomatic functions to know when something was wrong. The crystal glasses clinked too loudly, the laughter seemed forced, and the Centaurian delegation was suspiciously absent from their usual spot by the dessert table. She adjusted the collar of her dress uniform and caught the eye of Zaxthor, the Lyrian ambassador, across the room. His silver scales flickered with what she recognized as anxiety. At least their species shared that tell. "Wonderful party, isn't it?" A melodic voice startled her from behind. Kira turned to face a tall figure in flowing robes that seemed to shift colors like an oil slick. The stranger's features were obscured by an ornate mask, but something about their presence made Kira's combat training kick into high alert. "Indeed," Kira replied carefully, her hand instinctively moving toward the concealed stunner at her hip. "Though I don't believe we've been introduced." The stranger's laugh tinkled like wind chimes. "Oh, but I know all about you, Commander Jensen, and about your fascinating dynamic with Ambassador Zaxthor. The tension, the rivalry, the potential." Before Kira could react, a sweet-smelling mist erupted from the stranger's sleeves. Her last conscious thought was that she really should have listened to her security chief about accepting drinks from unmarked bottles. When Kira awoke, she found herself in what appeared to be a luxury apartment. If luxury apartments typically came with force field windows and no obvious exits. The decor was an eclectic mix of human and alien aesthetics, as if someone had studied both cultures but didn't quite understand either. A groan from the adjacent room drew her attention. "Ambassador," she called out, recognizing Zaxthor's distinctive voice. "Are you all right?" "Commander Jensen." The Lyrian diplomat emerged, his usual perfect posture slightly slumped. "I assume this isn't part of your human hospitality customs." "Hardly," Kira snorted, already examining the walls for weak points. "Though I'm sure some of my colleagues wouldn't mind if it was." Their tentative attempt at humor was interrupted by a holoscreen materializing in the center of the room. The masked figure from the party appeared, now dressed in what looked like a wedding planner's fever dream. "My darlings, welcome to the Love Crucible." The strangers spread their arms dramatically. "I am Vilara, and I have made it my life's work to unite souls across the cosmos. And you too." They clasped their hands together in delight. "You too have the most wonderful potential I've seen in centuries." Kira and Zaxthor exchanged looks of mutual horror. "Listen," Kira started, "I don't know what you think you've observed." "Oh, I've observed everything," Vilara interrupted enthusiastically. "The way you argue about trade regulations, how you always position yourselves at opposite ends of conference tables, the constant diplomatic one-upmanship, it's textbook unresolved attraction." Zaxthor's scales flushed a deep purple. "This is outrageous. I demand you release us immediately. This is a violation of at least 17 interstellar treaties." 19, Kira corrected automatically, then winced as Vilara squealed with joy. "See, you even finish each other's legal citations." Now, their captor's voice turned businesslike. "You have two options. Option 1. Participate in my carefully crafted program of relationship-building exercises. Option 2, Kira interrupted. We break out of here, and I personally ensure you face charges on every inhabited world in the galaxy." "Oh, sweetie," Vilara cooed, "there is no option 2. The Love Crucible has a 100% success rate. Well, 98% if you count that unfortunate incident with the Martian ambassador and the sentient fungus, but I maintain they weren't ready for that level of commitment." As the holoscreen faded, Kira turned to Zaxthor. "I don't suppose your people have any secret teleportation abilities you've been keeping from us. If we did, I wouldn't still be here listening to her butcher the concept of relationship psychology," he replied dryly. "Though I must admit, Commander, of all the humans I could have been kidnapped with, I'm not entirely disappointed it's you." Kira raised an eyebrow. "Was that almost a compliment, Ambassador?" "Don't let it go to your head. I simply mean you're competent enough that we might actually survive this madwoman's matchmaking scheme." As if on cue, Pink smoke began pouring from hidden vents, and a cheerful voice announced, "Lesson 1. Trust falls in zero gravity." Kira sighed deeply. It was going to be a very long day. "I told you to aim left." Kira grunted as she collided with Zaxthor for the third time in the zero-gravity chamber. Their bodies tangled awkwardly, his scales cool against her skin. In Lyrian's spatial orientation, "This is left," he retorted, trying to push away without sending them both spinning. "Besides, your species' concept of directional navigation is fundamentally flawed," says the ambassador whose people built their first spaceport upside down. That was a deliberate architectural choice. Their bickering was interrupted by Vilara's delighted voice over the speakers. Such passionate discourse. "Now let's move on to the next exercise. Synchronized space dancing." Both captives groaned in unison. They'd spent the last several hours being forced through increasingly absurd bonding activities, from answering probing personal questions to attempting to cook each other's native cuisine in magnetic boots. The result had been explosive. "Wait," Kira whispered, suddenly serious. "Did you notice? The gravity fluctuated when she switched programs." Zaxthor's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Indeed, the power draw must be significant. A potential weakness, if we can time it right." Kira glanced at the observation window where their captor watched with obvious glee. "We need to coordinate. Actually coordinate, not whatever this morning's disaster was." "Agreed." Zaxthor's scales rippled with determination. "Though I maintain that was entirely your fault." As music began to fill the chamber, a bizarre mix of earth pop and Lyrian harmonic frequencies, they moved closer together. Under the pretense of beginning their assigned dance, Kira spoke quietly. "The ventilation system. During the cooking exercise, I noticed it cycles every 15 minutes. Correlating with the environmental controls," Zaxthor added, his hand awkwardly finding her waist as they attempted a waltz in 0G. "The shield harmonics also pulse on a regular pattern." Their bodies drifted closer, maintaining the appearance of participating in Vilara's exercise, while their minds raced through escape scenarios. Kira was acutely aware of how the Lyrians' bioluminescent markings pulsed softly in the dim light. A stress response, she told herself firmly. "The real question," Zaxthor murmured, "is whether we can trust each other enough to execute an escape plan. Our diplomatic history is complicated." Kira thought back to their numerous confrontations over trade routes and colonization rights. The Lyrian ambassador had been a thorn in her side since their first meeting, when he'd systematically dismantled her carefully prepared proposal for joint mining operations in the Kuiper Belt. She'd retaliated by exposing his government's attempt to monopolize quantum communication channels. They'd been locked in a professional Cold War ever since. "I trust you want to get out of here as much as I do," she finally replied. "Sometimes that's enough." A slight smile tugged at Zaxthor's alien features. "Pragmatic. Perhaps humans and Lyrians aren't so different after all." "Don't let your council hear you say that. They might revoke your diplomatic credentials." Their planned escape attempt was interrupted by Vilara's voice again. "Oh, this is simply magnificent. The way you're opening up to each other. But I think we need to accelerate the process." The chamber suddenly filled with a sweet-smelling mist. "Not again," Kira muttered, trying to hold her breath. But it was too late. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in what appeared to be a simulation of a Lyrian sunset. The triple moons hung low on the horizon, and familiar constellations dotted the purple sky. Beside her, Zaxthor was already awake, his expression unreadable. "Your neural patterns have been temporarily linked," Vilara announced cheerfully. "Now you'll truly understand each other's perspectives. Isn't that wonderful?" Horror dawned on both their faces as they realized they could feel each other's emotions. Kira was flooded with Zaxthor's complex mix of embarrassment, anger, and, most disconcertingly, a grudging admiration he'd apparently been harboring for her tactical skills. Meanwhile, she desperately tried to suppress her own complicated feelings about his rare displays of humor and the way his scales caught the light. "I propose," Zaxthor said stiffly, that we never speak of anything we might experience during this neural connection. Seconded, Kira agreed quickly. And once we get out of here, we take this incident to our graves. Assuming your short human lifespan doesn't resolve that issue first. There's the insufferable ambassador I know and tolerate. But through their forced mental link, each could feel the other's amusement. And beneath it, a growing current of something neither was ready to acknowledge. Their escape had just become significantly more complicated. Your adrenaline spikes are highly distracting, Zaxthor complained as they crept through the ventilation system. After 3 days of Vilara's increasingly elaborate scenarios, they'd finally managed to override a maintenance hatch during another trust-building exercise. Well, your constant internal calculations about air pressure variations aren't exactly soothing. Kira shot back, still unsettlingly aware of his thoughts through their forced neural link. And maybe stop thinking about how inefficient human respiratory systems are. I apologize. Your species' biological limitations are simply fascinating, says the one who can't digest chocolate. Their bickering ceased as they reached a junction. Through their shared consciousness, they simultaneously processed the layout of the ducts they glimpsed during their adventures with Vilara. Left would take them to the primary control room. Right led to the emergency pods. We need to split up, they said in unison, then glared at each other. Stop that, they said together again. Kira took a deep breath. The neural link makes us too efficient at agreeing. It's unsettling. Agreed. Though I admit, experiencing human intuition firsthand has been enlightening. Zaxthor's scales flickered with what Kira now recognized as thoughtfulness. Your species' ability to make illogical leaps that somehow work out is remarkable. Was that a compliment hidden in an insult, Ambassador? Perhaps. His amusement rippled through their connection. And after sharing consciousnesses, perhaps you could call me Zax. Before Kira could respond, a familiar melodic voice echoed through the ventilation system. Oh, my darlings, did you really think I wouldn't notice your little escape attempt? Though I must say, the teamwork is absolutely heartwarming. Pink gas began seeping through the vents. Kira and Zaxthor shared a moment of pure mutual exasperation before losing consciousness again. This time, they awoke in what appeared to be a holographic recreation of their first meeting at the Interstellar Commerce Summit. Kira recognized her younger self at the podium, passionately arguing for human mining rights, while a less weathered Zaxthor systematically dismantled her proposals. Watch carefully, Vilara's voice commanded. Notice the spark between you even then. Through their neural link, Kira felt Zaxthor's memories of that day overlap with her own. She saw herself through his eyes, a fierce, unpredictable human whose arguments, while flawed, showed promising insight. Meanwhile, he experienced her initial impression of him. Irritatingly competent, arrogantly elegant, and thoroughly infuriating. Fascinating how you both mistook attraction for antagonism, Vilara commented. Such a common mistake among species with complementary cognitive patterns. We were not attracted, Kira protested. We were representing opposing interests in a complex diplomatic. She stopped as Zaxthor's consciousness flooded with embarrassment. Through their link, she caught a flash of memory. Him practicing counter-arguments in front of a mirror before their meetings, choosing his most impressive ceremonial scales. You prepared specifically for our debates? She asked, incredulous. Your persistence in being wrong required thorough preparation, he replied stiffly, but she could feel his discomfort at being exposed. The scene shifted to their infamous confrontation at the quantum communications hearing. This time, they both experienced the complex web of respect, frustration, and unacknowledged admiration that had underlaid their professional rivalry. You know, Vilara mused, in all my centuries of matchmaking, I've never seen two beings so determined to ignore their compatibility. The statistical probability of your genetic and psychological complementarity is quite remarkable. Statistics can be manipulated, they said simultaneously, then shared a surge of annoyance at their continued synchronization. Case in point, Villara clapped her hands delightedly. Now shall we review the incident at the Martian embassy? The one with the quantum champagne and the diplomatic immunity clause. No, they shouted together. But the scene was already shifting, and through their link, each felt the other's mounting horror at having their carefully maintained professional distance stripped away, layer by layer. Worse still was the growing realization that their captor, insufferable as she was, might not be entirely wrong about certain aspects of their relationship. I propose, Zaxthor said carefully, that once we escape, we never mention any of these revelations to our respective governments. Seconded. Kira agreed quickly. Though I admit, knowing you actually spent 3 hours choosing the perfect diplomatic robes to criticize my proposal in is somewhat gratifying. Just as gratifying as knowing you memorized Lyrian legal codes specifically to argue with me. Before they could continue their tentative exploration of these revelations, the hologram flickered ominously. Through their neural link, they shared a moment of perfect clarity. Something was wrong with the station's systems, and their matchmaking-obsessed captor might not have noticed in her enthusiasm. Villara, Kira called out, feeling Zaxthor's quick analytical mind already calculating possibilities alongside her tactical assessment. When was the last time you ran a diagnostic on your life support systems? The holographic chamber flickered again, this time accompanied by an ominous rumble that both Kira and Zaxthor felt in their bones. Through their neural link, they shared an instantaneous risk assessment that would have taken hours of diplomatic discussion under normal circumstances. The power core is destabilizing, Zaxthor announced, his scales pulsing with urgent patterns that Kira now understood meant extreme concern. The energy required to maintain these elaborate scenarios and the neural link technology is overloading the station's capacity, Kira finished. Villara, you need to shut down these systems now. Their captor's voice came through with an unsettling amount of static. But we're making such wonderful progress. Look how you complete each other's sentences naturally now, not just through the neural link. Another violent shudder ran through the station. Emergency lights began pulsing, casting everything in an alternating red and shadow. Through their connection, Kira felt Zaxthor's growing frustration with Viera's obsession, matching her own rising anger. Listen to me, Zaxthor said, adopting what Kira recognized as his most diplomatic tone. If you don't power down the non-essential systems immediately, there won't be any couples left for you to match. The containment field around the power core is failing. Kira accessed Zaxthor's technical knowledge through their link, understanding the full implications. We have maybe 20 minutes before catastrophic failure. The explosion would take out half this sector of space. There was a long pause before Villara responded, her usual cheerful tone wavering. But my success rate, my perfect record of matches. Your perfect record won't mean anything if we're all dead, Kira snapped. Then, feeling Zaxthor's subtle mental nudge, she added more diplomatically, but if you help us save the station, you'll prove that your matches can work together to overcome any obstacle. Through the neural link, she felt Zaxthor's approval of her strategy, along with something warmer that both of them tactfully ignored. Aye, very well, Villara finally conceded. The holographic chamber flickered out, leaving them in the bare bones of a massive mechanical room. But I'm not disconnecting your neural link yet. You'll need it to coordinate the emergency procedures. How convenient, Kira muttered, but there was no time to argue. Already, Zaxthor was moving toward the main control panel, his fingers flying over the alien interface, while Kira fed him human emergency protocols through their shared consciousness. The primary coolant system is offline, he reported. We'll need to reroute power through the auxiliary channels, but the radiation levels will be fatal to Lyrians, Kira finished, absorbing his knowledge of his species' biological limitations. But humans have higher radiation tolerance. I'll go. His protest hit her through both their link and verbally. Absolutely not. The temperature in those chambers is within my survival range, barely. She was already moving toward the access hatch. Your scales would literally melt off. Commander Jensen, Kira. His use of her first name, combined with the surge of emotion through their link, made her pause. The odds of survival are better than our odds if this station explodes. She managed a grim smile. Besides, I thought you believed humans were inefficient and illogical. Let me prove how those traits can be advantages. Before he could argue further, she sealed the hatch behind her and began climbing down into the station's guts. Through their connection, she could feel his rapid calculations and growing concern, using it to guide her through the complex maze of machinery. The heat hit her first, then the radiation warnings on her uniform sensors. Gritting her teeth, she pushed forward, using Zaxthor's technical knowledge to identify the critical junctions. Third pipe from the left, his voice came through her communicator, tense but professional. You'll need to reverse the polarity and... I know, she interrupted, already moving. I can see it through your eyes, remember. She could also feel his growing admiration for her pain tolerance, mixed with what felt suspiciously like worry. The combination was not unpleasant. The final junction required both hands, meaning she had to press against the scorching hot wall for balance. The pain seared through their shared consciousness, making Zaxthor gasp audibly over the comm. Almost. There, she grunted, making the final connection. The effect was immediate. The station's rumbling subsided, and the emergency lights stabilized. Through their link, she felt Zaxthor's relief wash over her like a cool wave, helping her fight through the pain and radiation sickness as she climbed back up. When she finally emerged, she found both Zaxthor and Valara waiting. The Lyrian ambassador caught her as her legs gave out, his naturally cool scales soothing against her radiation-heated skin. That, Valara announced, watching them with unrestrained glee, was the most beautiful display of cooperative problem-solving I've ever seen. The way you shared knowledge, trusted each other's strengths, worried about each other's safety. Valara, Zaxthor said very calmly, though Kira could feel his suppressed rage through their link. If you say this was all another one of your scenarios, I will personally ensure that every diplomatic channel in the galaxy knows about your methods. Oh, no. The danger was very real. I simply chose to see it as an opportunity rather than a setback. She beamed at them. And look how splendidly it worked out. Kira, still being supported by Zaxthor, managed to lift her head. When I can stand again, we are having a very long discussion about the definition of criminal endangerment. But through their neural link, she and Zaxthor shared a private acknowledgement. Working together, trusting each other implicitly, hadn't been entirely terrible. Don't worry, Valara said brightly, apparently interpreting their silence as romantic rather than exhausted. We still have so many more exercises to try. Now, who's ready to discuss their feelings about what just happened? The groan that followed was both verbal and mental, and perfectly synchronized. Your neural patterns have fully synchronized, Valara announced proudly, reviewing holographic data streams in her control room. I don't think I've ever seen such perfect compatibility, even accounting for your biological differences. Kira and Zaxthor sat on opposite sides of the room, deliberately avoiding eye contact while trying to ignore the fact that they could still feel each other's racing thoughts. After the power core incident, they'd spent another full day under Valara's observation, supposedly processing their emotional breakthrough. Since this has been such a success, Valara continued, practically floating with joy, I suppose you've earned your freedom. Unless, of course, you'd like to stay for the advanced coupling exercises. No, they shouted in unison, then shared a flash of mutual embarrassment through their link. Very well, Valara sighed dramatically. But before I release you and disconnect your neural bond, you need to have the conversation. Kira felt Zaxthor's immediate tension mirror her own. They'd been carefully avoiding any discussion of their shared experiences, especially the moments of genuine connection they'd felt during the crisis. There's nothing to discuss, Kira said firmly, though she felt Zaxthor's silent disagreement pulse through their link. We work together under extreme circumstances. That's all. Is it? Vilara's mask tilted knowingly. Shall we review the data? Your synchronized brain patterns during crisis response, the elevated emotional markers when in physical proximity, the shared dreams you've been having. You monitored our dreams. Zaxthor's scales flushed deep purple, and Kira caught flashes of what he'd been trying to hide from their connection. Dreams of diplomatic meetings that turned into something decidedly undiplomatic. Of course, the subconscious never lies. Vilara pulled up more holographic charts. And let's not forget your matching stress responses when discussing return to your normal duties. Because they both knew things couldn't go back to normal. Not really. How could they argue across conference tables when they knew exactly what the other was thinking? How could they maintain professional distance when they'd literally shared consciousness? The political implications alone, Zaxthor began, would be fascinating. Vilara interrupted. Think about it. A human-Lyrian partnership at the highest diplomatic level. The potential for improved interspecies relations. The romantic symbolism. It would never be accepted, Kira said quietly. But through their link, Zaxthor felt her uncertainty. Our species have too much history, too many conflicts. Perhaps, Zaxthor replied carefully. That is precisely why it should be considered. Kira turned to him in surprise, feeling his determined resolve through their connection. You can't be serious. I am always serious, Commander. It's one of my many flaws that you've pointed out extensively. His scales flickered with what she now recognized as nervous humor. But consider, we've proven we can work together effectively. We understand each other's perspectives more thoroughly than any human or Lyrian in history. And he hesitated, but through their link, she felt the rest. And I've never met anyone else who challenges me, frustrates me, and impresses me quite like you do. It would be unprecedented, she said slowly, but he felt her considering the possibilities. Many of humanity's greatest achievements were unprecedented, he reminded her, using her own species' history against her in a way that sent a spike of admiring annoyance through their link. Oh, this is better than my best simulations. Vilara clapped her hands together. But now comes the real test. She pressed a series of controls, and suddenly the persistent hum of the neural link began to fade. As their connection dimmed, Kira and Zaxthor stared at each other, both realizing this was the moment of truth. Without the link, without the forced intimacy and shared thoughts, what would remain? I still think you're the most infuriating diplomat I've ever met, Kira said into the growing mental silence. And I still find your species' approach to negotiation completely irrational, Zaxthor replied. But they were moving closer together, drawn by something that had nothing to do with neural links or matchmaking schemes. I'm going to file the longest incident report in diplomatic corps history about this, Kira warned. I expect nothing less. I'll probably have to create an entirely new classification system, just to document all the regulations she violated. They were standing directly in front of each other now, the last traces of their mental connection fading away. This is either the worst idea in diplomatic history, Kira said, or the beginning of a fascinating new chapter in interspecies relations, Zaxthor finished. As their lips met, well, lips to sensory scales, but the principle was the same. Vilara's delighted squeal nearly shorted out the station's speakers. Another successful match, she declared. Though I do hope you won't press charges. It would be terribly awkward to attend your wedding from a prison cell. They broke apart long enough to share a look that needed no neural link to interpret. We're definitely pressing charges, they said in perfect unison. But this time, neither of them minded the synchronization at all. End.